and Simi. We have started recording, I believe. All right, good stuff. Well, again, welcome everyone to Mentor Mondays. Mentor Mondays, the idea around Mentor Mondays is to bring the community together, specifically entrepreneurs, side hustlers, change makers, social impactors, and as well as mentors, experts, and anybody in the space that could help move your ventures along, or even if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, social entrepreneur, you can capture some of that experience that some of these folks bring to this platform, and also connect with them after these sessions. And so that's sort of the high level goal around Mentor Mondays. And so our agenda for today is to we'll talk a little bit about what we do at Edge and who we are, and then I'll do some introductions. So we have our guest today, and we'll get right into the human-centered design session that Kanika is going to lead, and then we'll end off at a Q&A. And so to start off, Edge, for short, it stands for Entrepreneurship, Discovery, and Growth Engine. And we are an impact-focused startup incubator that offers resources such as mentorship, community, training, and more for early stage entrepreneurs and change makers. We want to build on Sheridan's culture of creativity. So Edge provides support to entrepreneurs, sole proprietors, side hustlers, social entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and anything in between. We have 4 programs: Explore, Leap, Rise, and Soar, intended to take you to the various phases of what a venture will go through, from ideation, where you generate ideas; explore entrepreneurship; discovery, where you're working on a defined business idea and you're validating that through, to the validation stage, where you're building a solid foundation to gain your first few customers, develop a prototype or an MVP, and you're starting to build a team, to the SOAR program, where you're growing and you're refining that minimum viable product. That's what MVP stands for, growing traction, or you're preparing to scale. These are some of our 2019 metrics. And obviously, because of the unfortunate pandemic, we've had to move from this beautiful space that I hope sooner than later all of you can visit and hang out. But for now, we're moving all of our programming to the virtual world. And feel free to connect with us. We are very active on social media, on our website, and also, if you want to connect with me individually, I'll post my email as well on the chat. But if you want to connect with us on socials, feel free to either take a screenshot of this slide, or I believe Cole will be linking that out in the chat. And today, I'm super excited to welcome Kanika Singhal, who is going to be leading the human-centered design session. But I wanted to, Kanika, maybe we can all learn about your journey so far, and what has gotten you to this point, to working with social impact organizations, as well as maybe a little bit about how you ended up, or are currently, like, where you're at in your journey with your career and your professional development. So take us away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Diego. And I'm really grateful to be here today and share a little bit about my experience, and hopefully share some of kind of my knowledge and some tools that maybe will be helpful to some of you moving forward. So my name is Kanika, and I am a practitioner of human-centered design. I'm a market researcher, a strategist, facilitator of workshops. This is something that I did as part of my career, working with a consultancy for a few years. And majority of my clients were corporate clients. We were working with large organizations like Nestle and big pharmaceutical companies and McDonald's and, you know, you name it. And for me, I really felt kind of the pull towards supporting more of the impact industry. And a year ago, I left my job in Toronto and I moved to Lisbon, Portugal, where I wanted to pursue just learning more about the impact industry, meeting more social entrepreneurs, working with nonprofits, working with social enterprises, NGOs. And I've been lucky enough to meet wonderful people working on really awesome things and making an impact. So this is what really ignites me and makes me excited. So I'm very happy to share some of my learnings from my previous experiences and as well as what I've learned over the past year with the community here now in Mississauga and the GTA. And so maybe what I'll do, I guess I'll share my screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that intro, Kanika. I appreciate it. Yeah, let's go ahead and share your screen. Stop here and you should be good to go.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I'm very excited to share the human-centered design practice with you, and I'm sure this is not new to everybody. You've either heard of it or you've used some of it already in your practice. But for those who are maybe new to it, starting off with just a really basic definition. What is human-centered design? It's an approach to designing solutions. It's based on an understanding of the needs and desires of the people who are interacting with the offering. So it's a process, it's a tool. It's not one way to design something. And it's definitely also not just visual design. Often when we think about design, we think of something visual. This is beyond that. Human-centered design can be applied across various steps of an enterprise journey, all the way from exploration of an idea to proof of concept, to concept testing, to launch, to exploring pricing models, to product development, service, customer, everything can benefit from a human-centered design approach. Why are we talking about human-centered design? I think it's important to look at some of the experience of the general startup world, since we have a bit more data, a couple of decades now of startups who have gone into the market. And what we have seen is that generally 9 out of 10 startups fail. And what is the main reason? I believe it's out of 101 startups that were interviewed, 101 failed startups that were interviewed, 42% of them said it's because there was poor product market fit. So they made a product that nobody or very few people needed or wanted. So this is to say that what we see sometimes is really cool, really high tech, awesome, visually designed products and services that may not necessarily always fit into the need of the people who are being catered to or are being designed for. And so getting started in a human-centered design journey is, there are some steps to follow, and I wanted to offer these steps that are outlined by IDEO.org. And the reason I want to offer this outline to everybody is because this is available freely on their website. So IDEO.org specifically is the nonprofit arm of IDEO, which is a large innovation consulting agency. And IDEO.org specifically focuses on community-led development. They focus on social enterprise. And so specifically, they have what's called Design Kit. And these are a bunch of tools to help people practice human-centered design, as I mentioned, because it's a process, it's an approach, it's a practice. So this is the outline I'd like to offer. The first step, they say, is inspiration, which I'll also use the word research to describe. And this is learning about the people who you're actually innovating for or creating for or designing something for. The next is ideation. And ideation is once you know the insights, and I'm going to speak about insights more in depth in just a moment. Once you know the insights, the needs, the challenges, the tensions of the people, what are all of the different ways, all of the different solutions, all the potential opportunities that can help to address those needs, those tensions, and those challenges in that population or in that ecosystem. And last is implementation. So step 3 is all about, actually implementing that, that solution, the one that you've chosen. It's about testing the solution. It's about defining how you're going to measure success. It's about figuring out a way to scale it, fund it, monitor, and evaluate it. And the beautiful thing about this process is that it's not limited to any one part of the journey. It can be reused, it can be edited, it can be modified. Again, it's a tool to get through the design thinking and human-centered design process. So yeah, I've just included this link, so I'll bring it up again in a bit, but you can feel free to either take a screenshot really quickly or write this down, and I'll refer back to it a few more times. So as I mentioned, the first step is research. So really, human-centered design, it begins with insights. And frankly, I believe that all good design begins with insights. And what are insights? I've been talking a lot about the needs, the challenges, the tensions of the people that you're solving for, and that's exactly what insights are. They're the challenges or the experience of the group of people or an ecosystem that is going to be affected by your offering, your product, service, or program, or whatever it is that you're deciding to design. Their insights are generated by deeply understanding how these people live, what they value, what they're challenged by, what their beliefs are, how they function, what their relationships are like, all of these things. And they can be mined through various research methods. And so some of the most common methods that I've used in my experience is desk research, which is essentially secondary research, surveys, interviews, focus groups, observation, ethnography. So these are just some examples. There are more as well, but this is kind of a way to get into the lives of these people. And how do I find insights? So this is really the research method now comes in. And this has been kind of my bread and butter for many years, doing the, following this kind of research methodology. So I'd like to just share a way to get there. So first, let's say, you want to solve for some problem that you see. You might have already a hypothesis or a number of objectives. So this is the starting point. This is where you want to identify what it is that you actually want to learn from the research. So it can be in the form of hypotheses, it can be in the form of assumptions, which I'll talk about later. It can be, some inspiration you've received from somewhere. It can be, this gut feeling you have, okay, I feel like this is an unmet need somewhere, or this is something a population is being challenged by, or an environmental challenge. That's going to be what you're going to research about. Next is identify who you will be researching. So is it going to be the primary customer? So is it going to be the person who you think will buy what you're going to offer? Is it going to be another ecosystem player? So are you right now more concerned about whether government programming will support it? Are you, is it a different model where somebody pays for it but another person receives it? And do you want to talk to those people at the end who will actually be receiving your offering? Is it another stakeholder? So this is really important to identify, as each stakeholder and each ecosystem player will have a different set of needs and desires. And then it's about designing the research. So which method will you use? And again, going back to what I mentioned on the previous slide, it could be secondary research, you can do interviews, you can get people together in focus groups to review a product together. There are many different methods that can be used. It's also important, how many people will you interview or will you interact with, will you gather data from? It depends on whether you do qualitative or quantitative data, for how long will you engage them. And then you go on to conduct, actually one part of the designing your research is also what kind of questions will you ask? What kind of things will you use to understand them? And this is also making sure that you're questionnaire or the actual what we call discussion guide in any research is open-ended, it's unbiased, and this also kind of takes a little bit of gut checking and double checking with others and your peers. And so when you're conducting your research, which is the next step, it's also great to get help from others who are not, directly in it, because we all have biases as well. And so the more kind of, if you can get your team members involved, or maybe even some friends or others who are helping with your project, it's great to get different perspectives and just mitigate the bias as much as possible. And this also carries over to number 5, which is analysis of your data. So it's great to get together and ensure that, we're not bringing our own biases or our own assumptions into what we're hearing from the research. So analysis essentially is, what are the common themes coming up? What are the common challenges? What are the common tensions or the needs in this population that you're exploring, or in this specific stakeholder or this ecosystem player? So I just want to quickly do an insight generation exercise, and I invite everybody to open up their chat window. And we're going to work backwards just a little bit here, but looking at some successful social enterprises, all Canadian, I believe I've chosen. And what we'll do, I've just taken some text from their website, and I'd love for us to read through it and see, okay, what might be the challenges or some of these insights that they're solving for through maybe what you're seeing on their website screenshot or through some of the text from their website. So the first one is TerraCycle, and maybe some of you have heard of this one. TerraCycle is eliminating the idea of waste by recycling the non-recyclable, whether it's coffee capsules from your home, pens from a school, plastic gloves from a manufacturing facility. I bet we can add masks in here. TerraCycle can collect and recycle on almost any form of waste. We partner with individual collectors such as yourself, as well as major consumer product companies, retailers, manufacturers, etc. And with your help, we are able to divert millions of pounds of waste from landfills and incinerators each month. So I invite you into the chat, and just, what might be some of the challenges or the tensions or the needs of the people that they're speaking to here, that they might be solving for. And there are no right or wrong answers. We're just thinking of, what are potential things. Right, logistics. So existing logistics could be a big challenge that aren't solved for.
I would also welcome if you want to just enable your mic and just kind of say, what you think.
Yeah, great idea.
That'll be an option there.
Yeah, and exactly. So paying for waste disposal, exactly. So I might not know what to do with certain things I have, and I feel like I have to pay extra to recycle them or get rid of them in a good way. So some other insights might be that, we know we're supposed to not throw batteries into the garbage. We know we're not supposed to throw, certain things into the garbage, but they end up going into the garbage. We're kind of stuck with, what do we do with these things? And so that's another challenge. And increasingly, another insight could be people have more and more awareness of recycling and of, keeping harmful substances out of the earth, out of landfills. And so with this increased awareness, people are looking for solutions like this. Yeah, exactly, Michael, clarifying the misconception that there is no alternative for non-recyclable items. Exactly. Yeah, what is waste? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to move on to the next one, and we'll do something similar. And this is just to get, some juices flowing in what kind of needs might be existing in people. So the next one is earth suds. This is also a local example. And they make plastic-free tabs of shampoo, conditioner, body soap. And so on their website, they say 5.7 billion plastic amenity bottles are sent to North American landfills every year. This is the dirty side of soap. Amenity bottles found in hotel bathrooms can't actually be recycled. They're filtered out at recycling facilities because of they're too small, they have a low quality grade of plastic and often are contaminated. And then they go on to say in their products, they use premium ingredients like argan oil, jojoba oil, vitamin E to give a healthy look and feel that lasts. So what might be some insights? I mean, I think they mentioned some already in their website or in their text here. So what might be some needs or challenges people have? Yeah, high quality products for sure. Yeah, people don't want to contribute to landfills. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're looking for more environmentally friendly products. How does the price compare to existing solutions? This I'm not entirely sure. I think you'd have to look, the website is theirs, you have to just go look for that. But that's also an interesting insight, right? How much more are people willing to pay for something like this? Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next one. And I'm only realizing now these are all environmentally related. That was not intentional, but I like these brands a lot. So CoPower, also Canadian social enterprise. And it's what they say is investing in clean energy products is a great way to put your money to work for both compelling returns and measurable impact. But it's difficult for most investors to participate in this opportunity. CoPower makes it simple. Our green bonds are backed by a diversified portfolio of loans to clean energy and energy efficiency projects that reduce carbon emissions and generate steady revenues, revenues that are used to pay investors like you. So what might be some of the challenges that their consumers face? What might be some needs that they're addressing with their product that you can see even here, maybe in the imagery? Mm-hmm. Right. So investors looking to put their money for return that is more than just monetary. Yeah, Maya. Exactly. Investors who want market rate returns through impact investing. Yeah. Education as well. Yeah. I'm not sure if they offer that, but that's also another great insight. Yeah. Environmentally friendly investors. So clearly they've found a niche for themselves. They found this need that people have, and in terms of wanting to support clean energy projects with their finances, with their investments. And this was something that was not maybe available to them to this degree before. So, in working on with these insights, probably they did their due diligence in learning about their customers and designing their product and services to really deliver against those. And, that's why they're doing so well. It's part of the reason, I'm sure. So I just want to also make a stop on being aware of assumptions. And let's look in a popular example of a social enterprise, Tom Shoes. It was one of the first really social enterprises to make a name. We know that they're also one of the first to use the one-for-one model. So you buy one, give one. And let's say, for our example purposes, their insight was that there are kids around the world who need shoes to get to school, to play outdoors, to be healthy, but they don't necessarily have access to shoes in their communities. So Tom Shoes gives one pair of shoes to a child in need for every pair of shoes sold. So we can imagine that, they talk to their customers who will be the ones buying the shoes in maybe more developed regions of the country or of the world. And maybe let's say they really, made a great shoe and it's awesome and looks nice, it's very comfortable, very functional, all the great stuff. But then they've decided that this is their model, right? So for the one shoe bought by people in developed regions, they're going to give a pair of shoes to a child in need. What are some assumptions that are made when giving a pair of shoes to a child in need? So what I mean by assumptions, what are people at, let's say the people creating this program, what are they assuming in this process of going into communities where a child is in need of shoes and giving them the pair of shoes? What are the assumptions that come around with this? And I want you to think about think about the local economies. What are those like? How will it affect local culture? How will it affect other ecosystem players? Think about other systemic factors that go into, or that may be playing a role that is maybe a bit more hidden and we don't see that. So again, I'll invite you to either type into the chat or open up your mic and speak about it. Yeah, displacing local shoe sellers. Exactly. Yeah, an assumption is that the shoes are the gap between children attending school and not being healthy. Yeah, that is another assumption. Lack of local shoemakers, yeah, impacting their economic development potential. Any other assumptions they might be making about this format? Yeah, so these answers really do kind of hit home the message that I wanted to, right, that they can fairly they can fairly distribute in a local community. So who gets the shoes out of the community? So the reason I'm bringing this example is because in the past, Tom Shoe's one-for-one model has faced a little bit of criticism, some pushback, in that, some people's criticism has been, how effective is this model of donating shoes? Some criticism has been that it's undermined the local economy, it's displaced local shoe sellers, as you've been mentioning, that, that this is the reason that kids are not going to school. So these are all assumptions that really led maybe to a shorter term solution rather than addressing some of these larger systemic problems that existed within the economy, that existed within maybe the culture. Maybe it's okay for these kids to play outside without shoes. Like that's, so these are all things that are important to consider. And this is another key message that I'd like to offer is around validating assumptions. So oftentimes in a social enterprise, we're tackling social environmental challenges, and these are usually complex challenges. So it's not just that we're dealing with children not having shoes. We're dealing with a different number of different systemic factors that play a role here. And so these challenges come with a set of assumptions that each of us makes, and we make them based on our perspectives and the experiences we have of the world around us. So it's really good practice to, be aware of these assumptions, list them, list the assumptions you're making about the ecosystem that you want to affect, think about all of the ecosystem players, who's involved, and really validate these assumptions. Are they true? And you're gonna be able to do that through research and testing. So this is the really great thing about this human-centered design approach to things. So the next step is ideation, which is about really ideating all of the potential opportunities, solutions that can be created. After step one of research, you have all of this data, all of these insights, and you kind of know where maybe there's some gaps, or already like which gap it is you want to solve. And now it's time to think of all the different solutions or all the different opportunities that are within your capabilities, but are also available to address these challenges. And in terms of ideation, I'd also like to offer 2 tools that are accessible to everyone online, which are, again, I'm going to bring back this design kit by ideo.org. And I've just taken like a screenshot of just like 4 methods they offer within Ideation. But if you go online, you can read all about it, the process, and then also have access to all of these methods, open them up, and they take you step by step on how to actually implement that method into your practice to get the results that you're looking for, depending on, again, what your objectives are, what you're solving for, what you want at the end. And the other thing I'd like to also point out is that, when we think about innovation, and this is also what I was saying earlier, it doesn't stop at product. It doesn't stop at service. So Dublin also has what's called 10 types of innovation, and Dublin is the innovation arm of Deloitte. And they also have quite a lot of information online on just, these are the different kinds of innovations. So you see some things that we're quite familiar with, like product and service, but there's brand, there's channel, there's network, structure, process, customer engagement. So each of these has its own different options that you can choose from to just give you different ideas of how else to innovate. And this really opens up the number of options and opportunities that are available. And so we talked about ideation, bringing all of the opportunity solutions to the table. Then it's implementation. So this is really, from the ideation, ideally you choose one or a few ideas that you're ready to implement. And here you can test the solution, again, define your indicators for success, scale it, fund it, monitor, evaluate it. And yeah, so this is, again, I really want to hit home that human-centered design has a role throughout the journey. And just remembering that there are 10 types of innovation that you can use to kind of drive this journey. There are also all of these different areas where it can be applied: proof of concept, product innovation, service design, pricing model, impact assessment, user experience design, customer service, branding, marketing, advertising. So I really encourage you to look in some of the resources that were shared and explore how you might be able to use those tools and maybe apply them into your next phase, wherever you are. And at the end of the day, I really believe that the offerings that we create should add value and make sense for the people that they're meant for. So this is why I think this process is a good one to have in mind. So I'm going to end there. And the rest of the session, I believe, is going to be a Q&A. So Diego, I don't know if you want to say something before we jump into it.
Well, the first thing I want to say is thank you for sharing all the information there, and I think it's definitely the links there that you posted is certainly a great place to dig a little deeper, and also I encourage the questions today, like right now, but also to have those of you who want to maybe connect with you, Kanika, a little bit further to sort of maybe ask you some follow-up questions. But yeah, I just want to open up the virtual floor, if you will, for any specific questions that any of the founders or aspiring entrepreneurs, wherever you may find yourself in terms of the inspiration, the ideation, or the implementation, feel free to jump in, whether you'd like to turn on your mic and just jump in to ask questions, or if you'd like to just put them on the chat. So yeah, go right ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hey, is this Favor?
Yes, Favor.
Hey, Favor, nice to connect with you.
Nice. I have a question when it comes to the research phase, because that's where I'm in right now. When you talk about the inspiration, is that more of primary and secondary research? Because I'm understanding that is more of reaching out to people and interviewing them, and also maybe going online and looking at some data online. So is that the area of inspiration that you were talking about? Oh, you're mute.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So you got it right on the head. So it is, the inspiration is about the research, the primary, the secondary, and it's great that you're doing both, that you're learning from what's already available online and the work that people have done, and you're doing your own work with, I'm sure, like the people you're interested in working with.
Yeah, and when it comes to the ideation, do you mean that, because it says, yeah, all the potential opportunities or solution that can be created. Do you get that from finding, like, how do you come up with that? Is it just from the research, or is it probably what you think would be good for the market, or more of like you need to rely on the research to get to that step number two?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the step number 2 really does stem from the key insights, as we were talking about. So these are the themes that come out of your research. So let's say you're doing, your array of research that you say you're doing. Then from that research, you'll obtain the key themes, the key challenges, you'll start to see some patterns. And then once you have those patterns, there are different ways to go about ideation. So one way is framing it in how might we. So how might we is a way, so let's say, I'm gonna make this up based on the Tom's example. So let's say your insight is that kids in certain communities need shoes to get to school. So how might we make it easier for parents to afford shoes for kids in these communities? How might we, and you start to ask these questions, and the idea is the ideation phase. It's always much more fun to do with a team. So, bring your friends, bring people who are invested in your project. Also bring people from the population that you might be interested in. That could also be interesting. And this is where you take out your sticky notes and you're just ideating at this point. So it's really open, and it's meant to be a process that kind of brings in all of the ideas and all of the solutions, but there are different ways to do it. So how might we is one way. But if you go into that design kit link and you go under ideation, you'll find different ways to do it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, the impact gap canvas. That's great. Sean, do you want to speak a bit more about that?
I've started recently pivoting because I found that my initial venture, as good as it is servicing a market that either doesn't want to be found, customers or clients who don't want to be found. So I'm having to shift, and in shifting, I'm trying to tease out from the initial experience what I really enjoyed and what I really liked doing. And that's how I'm going about using that in terms of what do I see as being the problem, and then what do I see as being the solutions. And then what I really liked about what you presented was the structure, specifically, I think the last slide where Deloitte had that 10 buckets, because I think the impact gap is more about, I think, the brainstorming, whereas what you're presenting is a little bit more structured ideation, which is what I need, right?
Yeah, that's great to hear. And it sounds like you're really going through all the steps for yourself. So that's fantastic.
Oh, so much. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a lot. I think it's great. And the great thing about the impact gap canvas is that you can also keep that updated, right? So the more you do research, the more you learn, the more you can update the challenges, the more you can update the solutions. And maybe you'll find, some more gaps in between that you didn't see before. So. Yeah.
There's some, one of the things that that I found is or in this case, when I allowed myself to really, not necessarily dig deep, but to make some statements, some bold statements, then when you go back and reread it and posing the question, why is that a statement? Why do I feel that's a barrier? That flushes out a whole other tranche of variables.
Awesome. I'm sorry I missed just a little bit of the end of what you were saying. I actually got booted out of my Zoom, but
I was basically just saying that the impact canvas is good for pouring ideas out, and then to just go back and just probe why. Like why did I write that? Why did I view that as being a challenge
yeah.
for that particular client?
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite questions is why, why do we think this? Why are we doing this? Why is it like this? Yeah, great. I think Michael has just typed a question. So when do you think that you should shift from the research phase into the next phase, avoiding the analysis paralysis? Is there any key indicators that could help you realize when it's time to move on? So this is a great question. And yes, the analysis paralysis can be very real. The good thing is if you're preparing your research well in the beginning, you will identify your objectives already. You'll identify kind of what you want to learn. And so as you're doing your analysis, you'll start to see if these questions are being answered. So it's really good to have your objectives as questions, like what do you want to learn in the beginning? What are your learning objectives from this research? And so as you're doing your analysis, you're going to start to see answers, and you're going to start to see themes come up across the different questions you answered or the different conversations you have. And I think at some point, when you're satisfied with kind of, okay, I kind of have an idea of this, or this question is answered, I would say it's safe to move on. And not linger too much. The also other thing that I love doing is iterating. So, you get to the end of this phase. Thanks, Sean. I'm glad you found it useful. So you can get to the end of the phase of your analysis, or the process of human-centered design, and you test it out, and then you can iterate again. So I would say don't linger too long, and if you have the questions up front, it'll be a good way to start.
I have a question for you, and I'm curious to understand at what point does the why exercise come in? Does it come in at the phase where you're researching and you're trying to maybe get some more information through primary research and secondary research, and you've gone through maybe in a group setting, ideating, and then you start kind of pinpointing some of the challenges, those assumptions, and then you start to ask the various series of whys. At what point does it, or should it happen at both points, where you ask yourself why at the beginning during that inspiration stage, and then you also continue to carry that on through the ideation stage?
Yeah, it's a lot of it is it's the latter, so it should be kind of incorporated throughout, but it's really good to have it in the beginning, because this is where you're questioning and you're setting up the thing that you're setting out to solve. So as much as you're asking why in the beginning, the better, because you're kind of revealing more of the landscape for yourself. And maybe as you're asking why in the beginning, you can find some answers from secondary research, you can find some answers online already. But it's a good place to start in the beginning. The other place that the whys come in is when you're actually conducting your interviews or your research. And let's say you're with your participants and they tell you something interesting. Another place to do that is, okay, why is that? Or how does that work? Or explain that to me more. And that's another place to be really curious with the whys, or why things are the way they are.
I wanted to maybe, if you're okay with that, I know that, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Golness, but I have a question for you actually, if maybe you'd be able to shine a light on, because one of the things you spoke about, Kanika, was ecosystem and sort of how to best understand the players and goal. And as from my understanding around your venture, you've done a really good job understanding the players in your venture, and I thought maybe you could sort of shine a practical light as to how you approach that process and how it relates to human-centered design for those who are maybe kind of trying to understand who their the players in the ecosystem are.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I don't necessarily know if I used a scientific, proven process, but what I did is I actually went through and identified who are the different groups that touch my project venture. And then kind of looked at what are the challenges that they may be experiencing in relation, so talking about the hypothesis that you spoke to around kind of that, and also what value, where might the benefits and value be for them. And for our venture, the three broad groups, and our beneficiaries, or the people that will benefit most from our services, are different than who pays, which is kind of, it's interesting for social enterprise. That can often be the case. So in our case, one group or body in terms of our ecosystem would be students and early career graduates, and specifically Black, Indigenous, racialized women that are in college, university, as well as recent graduates. Second would be colleges and universities themselves as potential ecosystem players. And then workplaces, so organizations that would recruit our talent. As well as, there's others too, and I won't get into specifics in the interest of time, but those would be the big three, but there are certainly others. And we've done different things. So in terms of validating, first of all, digging into what is the real problem, what's the root cause, what's underneath, what are the key things we want to solve. We started with, we know based on research that the group that we're working with is highly educated, yet there's a disconnect when we get into organizations and we look at leadership. Only 6.5% of management roles are racialized women specifically, and the stats are worse for Black and Indigenous women. Yet, that's a really long-term issue that I don't think we can solve overnight with what we do. And so we started having interviews, focus groups, or design sessions, and dug deep into the research. And what we found is one of the biggest, root causes that we can play a role in is how do we support enhancing relationships and building influential networks. And making really meaningful connections that broaden the networks of the group we serve by connecting them to mentors, sponsors more than anything, as well as just influential people that early on in their journey, as well as other pieces. And then what was interesting is when we piloted one of our programs, we realized that the mentors that we brought in are facing the same challenges in the workplace. And so that's a really compelling problem to solve, right? Where your mentors and your mentees can actually have a reciprocal relationship. And through our professional development, we're not only supporting one group, but we're supporting the other two.
Right.
So does that answer your question? I went kind of roundabout. I don't know if I've actually answered it.
That certainly helps, though. The insights, the practical insights, helps, and I'm hoping that it also helps as a sort of somewhat of a case study, because you're sort of going through it as we speak, right?
And to add, we just had a design session this weekend with some of our ecosystem players around the table, and we started really broad. We didn't put our solution in front of them, but we started with one of those what might, how might questions that you talk to. And it's interesting, we broke them up into separate groups, and what they come back with actually validated exactly what we want to do, which was really exciting, and with some nuances of things that of course we're going to tweak. So that's how we approached it. And then we started broad, and then we narrowed them on specific design elements through rapid ideation. So that it was really powerful to do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
we're starting stages. It's we have ways to go, but that's how we're approaching it.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much for sharing that. We have a couple of questions in the chat. Nagashri asked, how do we bring in diversity in the sample set we choose for research? Kanika, did you want to add your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And that's something definitely to be very aware of when designing the research. Diversity is very important. Of course, you don't want just, one group's experiences if that's not the only group you're trying to solve for. So bringing in diversity in the sample set is really, it depends again on the methods. So if you're doing something online, there are ways, so market research companies generally have the budget to pay people to hire, like essentially give them incentives to do research, which is not always accessible or a possibility for a startup venture. And so totally appreciate that. But to get to that kind of, we're not going to get to statistical significance. It's not like a scientific method, but that diversity is important. So a way to do it is to tap into your broader network, tap into your universities, tap into your workplaces that go beyond your own personal circles, friends of friends. And so trying to get this range in backgrounds. And this is also a good thing to keep in mind as you're finding people for your research. So write down all of the categories you like diversity represented in. So whether it's gender, whether it's, their educational background, whether it's whatever it is, and make a list of those as you go and kind of make sure that you're doing your best to fill those spots and find those voices to represent the different groups. And yeah, I'm not sure if maybe Diego, somebody else wants to add on to that. Maybe Golnaz actually, because I know you have some experience with diversity as well.
No, I think you've captured everything. It's just making the effort to go beyond your own obvious contacts. When we did our very first design session 2 years ago, we actually put a flyer, we went low, flyer together of what the purpose was. And then we sent it far and wide and had our connections and contacts introduce their friends who told their friends. And that was really helpful. But again, it's just going that extra step to go beyond who the obvious. And it's amazing what people will refer you to get that diversity. Can you also comment on inclusive design?
Yeah, I will admit I don't have a lot of firsthand experience on inclusive design, so I can give kind of my perspective and my comments. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the previous question around diversity. So I think there is a due diligence in understanding truly the people that you're serving. So what I mean by that is it is, your job as somebody who is creating something for a population to understand that population or understand that group. And a great way to have inclusive design is actually bring people from that group into your design process. So this is often part of this design thinking process as well, where maybe when you're in the ideation phase, or maybe when you're kind of ready to choose a few ideas, bringing those people in from the community, not people that you know or that you would normally interact with, but people who would genuinely be the beneficiaries or the other ecosystem players of your offering, and going through that process together. And I think, Golden, as you mentioned, you did that this past weekend, and so that's definitely one way to go about it. And I hope I answered your question. Maybe you would like to add something as well, Gomez.
No, I have nothing else to add. I was genuinely asking. Thank you.
Okay, and there's another question by Chris.
Right.
So the gap between ideation and implementation is huge. How do you close the gap? So finding funding, software developers, it can get expensive quickly. Yeah, that is very important part of it, especially because there's not always a lot of funding available, or it's harder to find. And so one way to do it is do pilots. So do smaller scale launches of something, get it out there, get it tested, get the response, and know where you need to tweak. This kind of does two things. It costs less in the beginning. You don't have to have a fully fledged final product, you can have an MVP, so minimal viable product. And it also gives you that feedback, right? So you can once you implement it, maybe at a lower cost, maybe it doesn't look as pretty, maybe it doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it gets the job done, and then you can get that feedback back. The other advice I could give is also find a community. So maybe as part of like an EDGE program or another incubator, they might give you also the resources and the connections to finding talent and finding funding and having that support. Any other questions or comments, or just maybe somebody wants to share an experience that they have had using a method like this, success stories, or yeah, go ahead, Faber.
Sure. I'm sort of big on research because I'm in the EDGE program for an idea that I think is good. And also I just recently I launched sort of like a digital marketing business. And what I did was I haven't launched, but what I did was I called on a couple prospects, people that I think that would be good for me to work with. And the first person that I talked to on the phone decided to schedule a strategy session to see, like, for us to get on Zoom and see how I could help him get more clients, get more customers with internet marketing. So that's why I think I'm more big on research now, because all I had to do was just do that interview and call and just ask 8 questions. And I have a strategy session booked already. So I plan to do more research for the idea that I have, and hopefully it works out. So I just wanted to share that about
Awesome. That's really, really fantastic to hear. I actually have a question, if you don't mind sharing. You mentioned that you asked 8 questions. How did you come up with the questions? Maybe you can share a bit of your process.
Absolutely. So it's programs like this. So I think it was like through I think a couple of weeks ago, I was going through Facebook and I just saw some person talking about questions to ask people when you're looking to start a product. There's social media, YouTube, there's videos on YouTube about this kind of thing, right? But it just asking them, hey, let me know about you. What are your goals? And I think this other thing that you talked about, why. So I keep asking them, why do you want this? And why do you want this? And then for some reason, they go deeper and go emotional and talk about not just sales, and not, although those are good, not just their staff members, but they talk about their personal goals, and they talk about what they want to do and how they want to talk, relate with their family. So those stuff actually made me connect with them more and just made it easier to talk to, because then they tell me about their personal goals, and it just makes it better for me to understand where they want to go and produce a result that fits their personal goals as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that experience. I think that's such a great example of how far research can take you, even if it's just 8 questions and 1 conversation. It really is powerful.
Awesome.
There was another question there, Kanika, for you around if you could list your top 3 to 5 resources for moving from the research to implementation phase, what would they be? And Bernice asked that question.
So definitely I would recommend looking at that IDEO.org, the design kit by IDEO.org resource I shared. Personally, it really depends on the program. So it depends on, what you're asking in the beginning. That's going to really shape how you're going to get to implementation. So it's going to shape what research you're doing, who you're speaking to. Again, like going back to that process I shared, it's going to change for each one. It becomes very bespoke in that way. And so definitely the 2 tools I shared here, I would recommend. The great thing about that design kit, again, I don't work for IDEO.org, by the way. I just think it's a wonderful resource, and it's available for free, and like there are tons of methods, and I think it's, it's awesome that we can all access it. But on their website, they have different methods for ideation. They have different methods for inspiration, for ideation, and for implementation. So that's a great place to start and just kind of go through those methods. But again, it's really important in the beginning to be really clear with what it is that you want to achieve by the end of it.
Mhm. I think one thing too that I want to maybe share is one shared experience that well, I had an experience shared to me around the research phase, and speaking of how long it should take, and a member at Edge, I was asking her, how did you go about finding the problem that you ended up focusing on, and develop your business out of that? And she mentioned to me something that I feel like sometimes gets overlooked, which is, obviously with COVID, it's a little bit different now, but at the time she mentioned that she went out to these shelters for at-risk youth and spent about a year volunteering her time teaching classes there. And so I found that fascinating because before that, during that year, she was just out there trying to understand the problem better, and I guess you could say sort of like she was all going through the process of testing her own assumptions by speaking to not only the youth that were there, but also to speak to the administrators, and by spending time in various locations. And so after the year, she realized that this was like that she could move forward and start to go into, I guess in this sense, the ideation and more of the implementation, structuring what she eventually built. So I thought it was a good insight piece there as well. And in terms of actually I wanted to circle back to Kanika around how, in terms of timing, what can you share around, how long how long it would be a good idea to spend focusing in on that research phase with the ultimate goal of finding the problem that you're eventually going to try to tackle?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I just wanted to also comment on the story that you shared, and I think that's really fantastic. And it's really special to be able to have that experience, to spend a year in that scenario, learning from everybody. And I think that really is, one of the best ways to have research done, this immersion. In terms of how long to spend on research, so I'll give you an example. So I briefly worked with Link Mental Health, which is a startup that has come out of Edge, and maybe some of you, and I see some nodding heads, so you've heard of it and know of it. And I worked with Radwan on a research program, and for something like what he had in mind, we identified, his objectives, what he wanted to know from the consumers or from the people he was interested in, and that's one meeting. Then you spend, maybe a few hours or a few days thinking of the questions to ask based on your objectives, identifying who you're talking to, for how long. So maybe that process takes a week or so. And then you have to look for people to talk to. And this is actually sometimes the longest part of it because as we talked about earlier, we want diversity. So the easiest thing is to just go within our social circles and ask the people we know, but that's not, representative of larger groups. So a lot of the waiting time is actually waiting for people to come in. And so it really depends on, how large this market is potentially. So if a lot of people are interested in this offering, then, maybe you'll find people faster. If it's more niche, or if they're in harder to access communities, or if there's other barriers like language or something, then it will take longer. So in that example, I think we scattered it, and it took about 3 weeks to find people. We posted on Facebook and send it to, even I think through university channels, through mailing lists, to find people to talk to. And yeah, that took about 3 weeks or so to kind of get all the interviews. And then we spent time analyzing, which maybe is another week. And that's kind of the research. So you can definitely, I want to say maybe 4 weeks to really do it thoroughly. I wouldn't say to rush something like a research process, because you do want to make sure you're checking all the boxes. but it doesn't also have to be so thorough, right? So you can also bring in people from the community into a room for a couple of hours, get to know them, go through it. So again, it depends on what you're designing and what the question is. And I'm sorry, that doesn't give you a direct answer, but it can range.
Yeah, it helps. I mean, I think you sort of seems like it's sort of like depending on the scale of the market, the scale of the problem, and obviously the the constraints that you may have, if you, let's say you're working full time, and so I get it. I think it was more around, like you said, like the approach. It sounds like something that's very insightful. I wanted to maybe shift a gear in the direction of those who are thinking about starting, but not necessarily in the sense of a social impact based venture. And because this is also very applicable, human-centered design, for those who maybe have not considered social impact, and so one sort of kind of experience that I went through when I had well, let's say prior to 2017, I had a small digital marketing agency, and how I got to having like a list of clients, and it started from working for free, and that was kind of my research. So 3 years back, 2014, I started realizing that digital media and social media and Google was something that businesses, my hypothesis was that they're gonna, will they spend money on this? Was kind of the question. And so I started with doing free work with like a friend, like my parents' real estate agent, and started teaching her and asking her questions and stuff. And it led to realizing that she wasn't really, it's not that she didn't want to learn, she just didn't have the time to actually implement some of the things that I was teaching her. So I ended up saying, well, how much would you pay for this if I do it for you? And it started from like $100 a month. And then I was like, well, maybe I could, learn from this, do this for a couple of months, and then see if I can talk to some of her colleagues. And so I did that, and it just became an iterative process that I was learning, but I was asking questions, and then I was trying to think about, well, how does this make sense in terms of like the profit that I would make. And so I think, and I went through that process until I ended up sort of having these packages, and then I ended up, like in really trying to just knock on various doors, lawyers, chiropractors, real estate agents, and other types of businesses. But the whole process was like small wheels of iteration and iteration and iteration until it got to one point where it started to work out for me. So I think even if you're not a social impact venture, you're not trying to tackle this massive problem, poverty or climate change, you could still apply human-centered design in a side hustle, for example, or like just a traditional profit-based business.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. I mean, these are practices that are used by these large corporations already, or they hire agencies to do the work for them, which is, what I would do is work for these corporations and apply, it maybe wasn't called human-centered design, but it's the same principles. And for sure, it works in both models. I think because what we talked about, the, social environmental problems are more complex. They often do require, that deeper understanding of the environment. But definitely, like, this process is available to all sort of ventures. So that's great.
I don't know if anybody else would like to share some of their experiences or where they're at in their journey as we work towards wrapping up.
I have a question and comment. I know someone made the point about analysis paralysis, right? I find from my own experience and also working with, in different roles and whatnot, bias to action can be scary. And so do you have any words of wisdom for just, the example that Diego gave was a great one, how to have that bias to action and that iterative approach while, even within the research phase, so that we're not designing out of a vacuum, and having the courage to get out and have that bias towards action. Any words of wisdom, tips, thoughts?
Such a good question.
Yeah, I think Diego's example is great. It's definitely, I think, easier when it's a service because you're not creating, you don't need a lot of resources to build something that's a product or a software. So you can, have one version of it, test it. And by test it, it doesn't even have to be like, you're doing research. It's just how Diego explained, like he's offering his services, trying it out in the market, getting the feedback, asking more questions, and the next client, getting the feedback and iterating over and over.
I would add, I think, goals is such, it's such a great question for various dimensions, because it's like part of the entrepreneurship mindset is trying to talk to as many people as possible about this thing that you're trying to build, and figuring out how to leverage your network to just put yourself out there. And so it's so hard to pinpoint it into like the structure as to how to go about doing it, but I think it's really going to benefit everyone in terms of where they're at in their journeys, to try to just get out there as much as possible. That may be with your friends, and then asking your friends if they have any friends that they want to chat, or using your LinkedIn network, or participating in pitch competitions, conferences, just really putting yourself out there and trying to have as many conversations as possible, and try to record what you hear, and see how that aligns with like your hypothesis and the assumptions you've made. There's so many little tactics, like if it could go as simple as like, I don't know I don't think anyone uses a phone book anymore, but like it can go as far as just going on Yelp. If let's say you have a business, like you have a business that would that you like, your business idea, you would find Yelp as a useful platform, or it could just be as much as goal setting to send 10 LinkedIn messages per day. But it's really, the message, I guess, for me is try to talk to as many people as you can about it, and leverage your network.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And it also reminds me of the example that Favor shared, which is great, right? Like you have the first person just ask questions, be curious, and then a little bit more, and then the next person you talk to, okay, this is what I heard, like how does this sound, or what is your experience, and see if that makes sense, if that aligns. And you're still doing that research process. It's not so like regimented and following a timeline and a method, but it's still as valid, and you're still doing the same thing, just iterating over and over. And that's just, I would say, it's as effective in approaching something like this. And and like the example Diego shared, that's great. Like talking to people, like, you're walking into a cafe or coffee shop, just open up the conversation with this person about, maybe you have an idea about getting rid of waste. Okay, hey, like, how do you guys get rid of your waste? Or, what are some challenges you have? And really having that curiosity and the mindset exactly to, be able to learn more. And also maybe a little bit of, being humble in that maybe you'll hear something that doesn't align with what you think about your product or service, but at the end of the day, that's really helpful for you. So or at least it's, another thing to explore, or another thing to be curious about. So the more, we can ask questions and just have these conversations, the more doors will open up and more ideas will come.
Yeah.
I had a comment I wanted to add, and I've been enjoying the examples of questions, that you would pose during an interview. And what I've noticed is a lot of the questions are exactly worded as, what do you do? And I think that was a big lesson for me learning about customer interviews, is making sure you don't or you try to ask what people have done, as opposed to giving them a hypothetical situation. What would you do? And I think that's one of the reasons why I try to push towards a bias towards action, right? Because when you're having a conversation with someone one-on-one, the human tendency is to be kind and to be nice, and just to answer in an affirmative, very agreeing manner. If you really want to know what people will do, then test it, right? Maybe through messages where you've got a little bit of a buffer between that human connection, and then maybe taking your messaging, or if it's develop like an app or a process or whatever it is, removing yourself from that equation and then testing beyond the interview. So maybe it's part comment question. If you have any comments on that research phase, once you go beyond the direct human interview, if that makes any sense. My question.
Yeah, I think one thing that you pointed out, and I'd like to correct myself, is it's great what you said, like to ask questions about what they've done already. I think that's a great point out, because it is really important. It's hard for us to answer hypothetical questions. And often if we ask hypothetical questions, we'll get hypothetical or aspirational answers, because we want to give kind of, the answer that is the best thing. So it's a great way there are many different interview tactics and techniques. That's also, another whole area to explore, is how to ask unbiased, good research questions in these cases. So just wanted to acknowledge that. And sorry, you mentioned about, I'm sorry, I lost the second question.
Since we're talking about research in terms more of a direct human-to-human interviews.
Yes.
The ones we get beyond that, we say, okay, here's now an assumption. Now we need to test it on a bigger scale. So maybe it's through, I don't know, some marketing messaging, right? Or maybe in my case, it would be through my app, and actually saying, do people actually engage the way that they said they would, or that I think they would, right? So I don't know if you have a question.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a great question. And some examples of that is like A/B testing, right? So you get some feedback about, maybe you have an app and you get some feedback about, okay, well, people kind of seem to like this placement or this description first, or this kind of messaging, but people also seem to like this. Are you able to A/B test both versions and see which one people attract with more? So that's one testing methodology. Another one is also something like A/B testing ads on social media. So you can release two versions of an ad with different messaging, different feeling, and different, branding even, and see what people click on more often, and where they click. So these are all indicators of, more engagement, and maybe that is more resonant with your audience, with your target. And there are different ways to do this. I mean, even if you pull out pilots, or even if you offer different package options, like if you're doing digital marketing and you want to give two package options on your website, like, hey, I offer this and I offer this. And then you can see, okay, people are actually more interested and have more appetite for this option instead. And so there are different ways to do this. And in that 10 types of innovation also, it's cool because they give, I don't know, more than like, I feel like there's 20 examples of pricing models. And so you can test different pricing models. And the great thing about pricing model is you can test 2, 3 at the same time. You can test a pay what you can model and a subscription model at the same time. You can test different things. So yeah, like once you're out there, you can kind of tweak things and play around.
I would add to that, Crystal, just by the nature of understanding a little bit about what you're working on, I think in terms of the program development side, what I think you could consider is, and you probably already are doing this, is if you're thinking of iterating different versions of your programs, let's say, each version should have like an evaluation kind of sheet, which you probably already do, to capture like what is the feedback for this specific program that I'm running. And then if you kind of find that the feedback comes back to you with new insights that you may have not considered before, if let's say you do add some of those insights into like a version 2, have another mechanism to capture that evaluation. And that way you can kind of use those two and say, okay, well, we went from this first version for programs, we maybe got involved with various partners, and maybe that was a good approach, but some of the feedback came back and said maybe less partners or more partners, or various kind of pieces there that may come through your like evaluation system. But I think that happens prior to the implementation phase. It's kind of almost like the part of where you've kind of gone through your ideation and you start to sort of kind of implement. And part of the implementation is how are we evaluating this version, because we know it's going to evolve over time.
I can add one more thing to the question you asked, Crystal, about like asking questions that look backward or reflect on the experience. What I was taught when I first set out on this approach, like on this journey, so to speak, in my early stage research, was to ask about, like, here's the challenge, here's the problem, like what are, to get in there, to better understand, like, what are they tapping into to address that problem? What solutions are they currently seeking? And then what's not working with those? And that was really interesting, like in the early stages. So because we're a career accelerator, we kind of tackled that by trying to understand, like, when they were doing job search and like all that kind of stuff, what resources, sources, people, everything they tapped into, and what was not working with those. And that was the first like stage of conversations and interviews. And I would love Diego and Kanika's thoughts on what you think about that approach. That's what I was taught early on.
I love the question so much because it brings me, I mean, even through the stuff that I work on here at Edge, but I think just looking back at my experiences with when I had my company, it was great to always sit down and when I'm sort of prospecting and I'm sort of trying to figure out how I could approach the sale, I would always ask, like, what are you currently doing, and what's not working? And that always seemed to really start a conversation because the prospect would sort of have their own experience with prior, digital marketing agencies. And it would really help as an insight gathering opportunity for me to just really soak it all in. And then I would sort of drive my approach to say, well, recap on that experience that they've had and sort of how like, but it was a little bit more sales driven, but the question around what is working and what is not working is so powerful.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Gomez, thank you for sharing that and bringing that to light. Like, it is very, it's good to know where they are. And I think maybe, and I don't want to dig too deep into like maybe what the questionnaire could look like, but generally, like, if you want to explore any sort of question or challenge, it's really good to get like a landscape view of their current experience of it. And that's a really good starting point because that's their current reality. You haven't introduced any new ideas to bias them or to influence them in any way. So starting off with like, hey, tell me about you, what makes you you, and then tell me, as Gomez said, like, how do you currently solve for this challenge? And first tell me about this challenge. How does this challenge even impact you? Then how do you solve for it? And what's working and what's not working. And that gives you a really good landscape view of kind of what they're currently dealing with. And then you can even start to introduce maybe new ideas or be like, explore something even deeper. It'll reveal something. So I think that's a fantastic approach.
Well, in light of time, working towards wrapping up, I just want to thank you, Kanika, for coming in today and sharing your knowledge and expertise around human-centered design and just being so open to tackling the various questions and various perspectives. I want to also thank everyone else for joining as well and sharing your perspectives, and it's great to tag along in your journey as you continue to seek that inspiration / research, ideate and implement your social ventures or your traditional ventures. I certainly look forward to connecting with anyone who isn't aware of what Edge does. I am adding again some of our social media links as well as our website if you're interested in just following up. And Kanika, maybe you could quickly add your LinkedIn as well if you have it handy so that people can connect with you. And again, thanks so much. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. And I look forward to seeing you in the next Mentor Mondays.
Yeah, thank you everybody so much. It's been wonderful discussion, and thank you for your participation and all the questions and everything. I'm
Thank
posting
you, Kanika.
thank you. I'm putting my email into the chat, and I'll also share my LinkedIn.
Okay, thank
Awesome. Thank you. Diego, thank you so much. This
Thank
was
you, Hannah.
awesome. Really, really awesome. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
everybody.
And thank you, Cole and Simi.
Yes, thank you guys. Thank you, Colin, Simi.
you.
And just before we wrap up, I believe we can save the chat. Just I'm gonna make sure Cole already, is that something we do? Awesome, good stuff. So yes, absolutely, we'll share the chat as well. Thanks everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Kanika.